from Romania. We may know them as Sarah is Roger and Lynn's daughter, and she brings with her her family, which is great. They're over here just for a time of refreshing, but while they're here, they also like to share what they've been up to as well. So I'm going to ask Danny and Sarah to come up. They're going to share with us a worship song to begin with.
We were debating what song to do, but we chose to do a traditional Romanian song. And the story of this song is a beautiful story. It says that at one point we had a few men of faith during the communist system. You might have heard of Richard Wurmbrand, was one of them, and his wife. And then there was another man called Traian Dorza. He was a poet. He wrote lots of songs, and he wrote this song. And in the middle of persecution, he wrote these beautiful words. And most of his songs have the same theme. And the words of the song says more or less this: help me, God, to love more, and your love to be within me. And he talks about the love of God and God's eternal grace, the fact that he gives us salvation at the cross. And I know you're not going to be able to worship with us, sing with us, but you can worship with us. So I just hope that it goes beyond the words, even though you don't understand the words. It goes beyond, and you get what the song says from the emotions of it. So, yeah, it's the red one.
Totul
I'm a blessed man with a beautiful woman, and she works. We work both together very well, and it helps that she has a good voice as well. So tonight we thought we were going to give you a quick update. Our hope through this is that we'll inspire you. Our hope is that we'll encourage you. The one thing we don't want to be, it's very easy to become about us and lose focus that actually is about God. And many times we've been asked, how do you do what we do? And the answer is, it's not about us, it's God in us who does. We are just like you, like everybody else, people which just listen to what God says. So, Tom, are you with me, yeah? We're going to move through them. Holly's with me? Okay. So you can put the next slide. And this is my dad, it's not me, it's my dad. And we just thought we're going to give you a quick image of how the vision of the work in our village started. So it goes back to early 90s. You might have heard me telling the story with a packet of coffee where a lady from England in 1990 actually wanted to help. We just came out of the communist system. She wanted to help to make a difference. So one day I met this lady in Leighton Buzzard where Sarah grew up, decided to pray over a jar of coffee. They put their hands, they prayed, they put a little address on it, and they sent it to Romania. Somehow God made that coffee made it all the way a few thousand miles away back to where I lived in Karand. Now I remember that time, but out of that coffee, out of that prayer, the church was built. But the church didn't start it, and it wasn't as it is now. Then it was a totally different time. If you put the next slide, it will give you, that's again my dad, who was the pastor at the time, doing baptism service. Baptism service were held in the local swimming pool, and people will be around. On your left will be the church, how it used to be. If you put the next slide, that's people early 90s, and that's my dad in the front. And on the right, you get the new build and the new church. And the new church and the new build came with a vision. A while ago, we celebrated 20 years. I think it's 2019. We celebrated 20 years since it was open. And the vision was like this: to be a place where everyone can come in. That's why the name of our church is Biserica Betania, which means Bethany Church, Friendship Church. And it's a place where we welcome everyone. It was different. How was your experience when you can put the next slide, when you came first to Romania?
It was very different. I mean, it still is very traditional in its ways. So, for example, in the picture you saw a minute ago, the men were on one side and the women were on another.
Yeah, you can put the next
women
slide.
weren't allowed in any kind of role in the church. They were just there to sit and listen. Also, women had to wear a headscarf, had to be in a skirt, and also no jewellery, no trousers. There were a very strict set of rules for women.
Yeah, we grew up in a very... I always laugh. I was laughing with Mark the other day. I grew up, and even now when I have a chewing gum in my mouth, I usually, every now and then I think, I'm going to be punished by God because I'm not allowed to have a chewing gum. And we grew up like that because that was the time. But by the grace of God, things change, and this is the new build, the new church, but it was still very traditional. And if you can put the next one up, but slowly it started to move. We used to have a massive pulpit in the front, isn't it? Where the preachers used to hide. Men on one side, women on one side. Women, she would have never been allowed without a headscarf or with jeans or with earrings or anything like that. I was kicked out of a few churches before. I think 2 churches kicked me out of a service as a teenager. And we wanted something different. We wanted a church where everyone was welcome. And this is just a snapshot during the pandemic. That's me on the right with my daughter painting. That would have been classified as an icon. Her painting a picture while I was preaching, illustrating through her painting what I was talking about. And on the right, this is during the pandemic we were allowed to have services outside at one point, and there was just us on the outside. If you put the next slide. So, the challenges, I called it, of 2020. I know everybody was hit by 2020, and it was, in Romania we have a word, it's like the hammer hits you right here and knocks you out. And a lot of people and a lot of churches were in that situation. And we were in that situation as well. If you talk about how was the first...
Yeah, so I spoke a little bit this morning about actually what happened at the beginning of lockdown, and I'm sure some of you may have heard already, but in Romania we were locked in. So we weren't allowed walks or anything, we weren't allowed out of the house. The only reason we were allowed out of the house was for a medical reason or for food. And like that, we had to have paperwork saying exactly where we were going, what time we were going to be back. And we had armies and police kind of roaming the streets. And if they caught you out, then you'd get a very hefty fine. It was very strict rules. And like I said this morning, whoever was here, over 60s were only allowed out between 9 o'clock in the morning and 11 o'clock in the morning. So a very short period of time.
When it comes to church, no one really. Only young people would know how to use Zoom, so that was out of the question. And the only platform we could have communicated one with each other was Facebook, because most of people could use Facebook. I remember the first week we've done it, I always said I didn't want to do the service online. We had to borrow Toby's phone, and his phone, you can see the picture there, I was white, very pale, because I was not nervous, but I guess, I'm probably nervous, isn't it? Mm. But I had the pencil, and I was laughing with Marcus, their living room was probably like ours, and the phone was holding places by different pencils, different things, and 5 minutes before I should have started, I said to Sarah, I'm not going to do it. I don't want to do it. But by the grace of God, as I said, I'm blessed with a beautiful, wise woman, and she said, you're going to do it. And I had no choice, really. But it was good. The beauty of it was this. I said, nobody will listen. It's going to be bad. It's not going to be good. We were very surprised by the end of that service. That day we had over 1,000 views. And you have to think, we are a very small church, smaller than yours, about 60 people probably in total. No equipment, but through God was good to us. On your right, the scary guy, that's me. Again, a challenge which was for us. Being in a small community is like being in a family. And every death we had, it was like someone there, because we all knew each other, we all know each other. And there were times where we had 2 coffins, and that was very daunting. Every time someone would die, it'd be like someone from your family, because we are a very close community. The way we would do funerals, at the beginning of the pandemic, we weren't allowed to have more than 8 people. That's including the family and the preacher. And if the person died of COVID, you're supposed to only hold it at the cemetery. And you had 20 minutes, I think it was all. And all the time I had to wear gloves and masks. And now the challenge is we serve in a community where we have Romanis, Gypsies, and we have a church there as well. And for example, to understand, they're not the best at keeping the rules. And I had a funeral right in the middle of the pandemic, and the guy was tested positive with COVID, and I knew that they're not going to keep the rules of 8 people. But because we were good friends with the police, where's Preston? He had a coffee with me, with the chief of police, and we were good friends with the police. And I said to them, "Don't you dare come in by, because usually they will patrol." I said, "I'm having a funeral, and it's not going to be pretty." And it was supposed to be 8 people. And when I turned to the funeral, the cemetery, I had over 100 people just gathered together. But it was trying to manage all of that and the fear of people. Most people wouldn't know what happened, because there'll be elderly people as well, wouldn't there? If you put the next slide. But in every challenge, there is a blessing as well. And there is that verse in Romans that says, God will turn things around, will turn things for the benefit of those who love him. And praise God that 2020 had its own blessings as well. And the last few years. So if you put the first, yeah, you can put just go through the list and then we'll go again. One more time. Yeah, there you go. One more, and that's it. So first Sunday, we did it online. We had over 1,000 views. For us as a small church, that was such an encouragement. It was such a boost. In the midst of confusion, one of the first churches, one of the first churches in our area, even though it was only by a mobile phone, we were one of the first churches to actually stream online. And I always said we were among those massive mega churches which invested hundreds of thousands of euros in media, had their own TV shows, but we were like, if you want to, like the underdogs, like the small one, but it's not about how big or how small you are, it's about what God does through you. And that was for us, the biggest view or the biggest number of people we reached, it was in December 2020, and over a month period, we had over 16,500 people reached through our online platform. And for us, again, we are 60 people in total. Most of us, we are a mixture of elderly and younger people, isn't it? Yeah. It enabled us to reach people far beyond Karand, Karand being the village where we are. And he says there are youth from surrounding areas. A lot of youth came back home because there weren't a lot of schools, university youth. And they slowly, because they saw us online, they started to come. And actually, even when we started to meet in person, they started to join us in our worship, and that was an encouragement. And I said, people started to come to Christ online platforms. If you put the next slide, and if you can play it, it doesn't need to be sound in. You can just play it. He was our first fruit in the pandemic, and this is me just giving him a baptism. He was totally against Christianity and church. I think in all my life, I saw him twice at church, and he wouldn't, even then, his wife made him come, because she was part of our church, but he was totally, utterly against. And as we went online, his wife was watching our services, and after the first week, the second week, he said, aren't you about to start your service? And in less than a month, he gave his life to the Lord. And this is me. We had to improvise. He was not very well. He couldn't hear properly, so we used a jug of water in the bath. But I always say he was our first fruit. But he was the first, but many came after. And we had quite a few baptism services. So she would be outside with two young people just singing. And I will go in and we'll do the service, and then we'll do a prayer, and we'll do one more song out, and then we'll go home. But that was an experience, and it was an encouragement for us. You can put the next slide. Yeah, this is you.
Okay. So we have in the charity Adopt a Friend, which is a scheme which many of you know about. It's when an English family adopts a Romanian family, and that means, depending on the size of the family, they get 1 or 2 or 3 bags of food a month. Now, as you can imagine, during the pandemic, the fact that we needed paperwork just to be out of the house, we had to fill out so many pieces of paper to be able to deliver the food for them. It became really, really difficult. Thankfully, as Danny said, we have good relationships with the police, and we're kind of in touch with them constantly throughout all the journeys. But Adopt a Friend, I say this every time I talk about Adopt a Friend, that every year it's needed more than ever. But through the pandemic, it was needed desperately. And it wasn't just the food, it was the interaction. Some of these, especially the elderly who weren't allowed out at all, couldn't get to the shops. We were the only faces that they were seeing in months. And their face would just light up when we walked in the yard. And it gave us a great opportunity to actually, with distancing, be able to pray and talk with them and just share a little bit of hope, because of course everybody was really struggling at this time. Of course, the food was hard to find. Prices got extremely expensive. And the prices of food now are like in England. So elderly person who's living on a pension of just under £200, it's almost impossible to afford the food. So Adopt a Friend has been incredible, really. We now have 38 families. And one of the most encouraging things, I think, for us is that we've got other churches now who see the
benefits.
They see the benefits and they want to do their own version. And that's what you want. You want someone to see that and say, look, I can do that as well. And then we've been working together with another church and just trying to help them set up their own scheme, which has been amazing.
Yeah, it's been very good. Of course, we broke the rules every now and then, don't tell anybody. And when you go and you have 5 kids just desperate to that family on your right, usually they will run down the bridge and just give you a hug. And it's almost impossible not to say.
The first thing
no.
they do is they rip open the chocolate. That's the first thing they need to find out of the bag is the chocolate. Is so cute.
Danny,
yeah.
What are you wearing in that dress?
I'll explain later.
One of the things which was good with Adopt a Friend, because he's a fire volunteer, and we have a chimney jeep, and it's used for the community for the firework. It's got lots of lines on it like a fire engine would. So when people saw him dressed like a fireman and with the jeep and the bags, everybody knew we were a charity and didn't really question us. So, yeah.
It did help and it became handy. Now, the minibus, we felt for years God was calling us, but in 2020, we really felt God was pushing towards the minibus and we saw the need. Now, the beauty of the number plate is BBC, because it stands for our church, which is Biserica Betania Cran, not the BBC, even though it works nice, doesn't it? But we felt, and in 2021, last year, we managed to, and we were blessed, and the charity managed to buy the minibus. And on the right, you'll see the elderly lady, if you want to say your story.
The lady in the picture has been a lady who's been part of our Adopt a Friend, but also part of our church for the last 20 years or 30 years since it's been open. She's been a dear, dear part of our family. Unfortunately, she's had a very hard life. Her husband was an alcoholic and her son as well. She also lost a son at a very young age. She's just, but an incredible and very faithful lady. She never missed church. And unfortunately, about a year ago, she had a stroke. 2018, she had a stroke, which left her paralysed. And in Romania, we don't have the resources and the rehabilitation which you could find here, or she couldn't get any physiotherapy to help her to start moving again. But her one thing that she really wanted to do before she went to the Lord was to get back to church. Of course, there was no way we could do it up until when we got the minibus, but the minibus that we were blessed with has a really big boot. So one Sunday we popped her in a wheelchair and brought her to church, and it was the most amazing time, like family when you haven't seen someone in a long time. Everybody was crying and it was beautiful. And unfortunately, a week or two later, she passed away. But we were just amazed at how God brought along that provision for her that she so dearly wanted to get back into church.
Yeah. If you put the next slide. And the minibus, of course, it helped us. Every year we do about 100 Christmas presents. Usually we would have a big Christmas party at the church. We weren't able to, but we were allowed to make presents and deliver them at everybody at home. So this is just some of the youth who helped us make the presents, and we managed to go to all the kids, about 100 kids, 100 houses, and just deliver. Again,
the children had been doing school online, so we were, again, some of the very few people that they got to see, and the joy on their faces when they saw people and a present.
And chocolate.
It was double.
But Sarah said to me last few months, she said, we never knew why we needed a minibus. And you know, sometimes, as I said this morning, we do our plans, but God has his own plans, because I don't know what's going to be tomorrow or next week, but God already knows what's going to be tomorrow or next week. And if we put the next slide, as you know, in February, end of February, the war started in Ukraine. Now we are very close to Ukraine. We are next country down. We share a massive border with Ukraine. We live on the west side, which is as far as you can get. But the second day the war started, it was a Saturday, I woke up and I said to Sarah, we need to do something. We have to do something. And just the overwhelming of seeing people running and seeing children and women.
There was a lot of fear being so close. I mean, we saw the trucks and the armies passing through.
A month before.
Yeah, a month before the whole war started. So you can imagine the fear that was kind of brewing along Romanians and Ukrainians. And it was just like a bomb exploded. You know, everybody was waiting for it to happen, and then it happened.
But one good thing is Romanians don't have the best name over Europe. I don't know how, even in England, I don't think so. We have the best reputation. But when the war started, we were amazed of how Romania, Poland, Hungary responded to the people. And they were, in March, it's still cold. If you go up north towards Ukraine, it could get to -15. And there were hundreds of people sitting at the border with food, clothes, free transportation, free hotels were given, and we were just amazed. But me growing in the early 90s, and I remember when we got out of the communist system, where a lot of aids came from England and France to Romania. And one of the things I realized then, it was all the good, the way it would work, all the stuff would go to big warehouses or big churches or big towns, and from there they would start to split, and then by the time you would go to people like us, you'd be nothing left. And probably the people who need it most in the countryside where they don't have resources would be the last one and almost get anything. And I said to Sarah, when this started, we need to make sure we don't do the same mistake. I don't want our stuff to go in a big warehouse. I want it to go right to the people of Ukraine. And before we even knew it, we were in a contact. My sister lives halfway, right in the middle of Romania. And their church, they have a charity which they have missionaries in Ukraine. And they started, as we were praying, they started to bring transports to Ukraine. And we joined them. We did an appeal in our church. We did an appeal online where a lot of you responded very generously. We're amazed about our church. Our church is made of people which live about, probably most of them have £200 a month, and the same price is almost like here. And we raised in the first 5 days over £2,000 worth of just money for medicine, plus clothes, plus food. And after that, we were just overwhelmed with people just giving in Ashford and all over UK. They were just giving. And you can put, we bought one of the medicine a lot. One of the few needs, or the desperate needs they had in Ukraine was for asthmatic people. So we bought hundreds of Ventolin. You guys who study medicine would know. And insulin, we bought thousands, I think, of shots of insulin.
God really moved on that. They were in desperate need for insulin. And of course, you can't get insulin without a prescription. It's very hard to find, and it's very expensive. But we have a wonderful pharmacist who has a real heart to help people. And he was like, I don't care. Just tell me how much you need and how much you want, and I'll get it for you. And bless his heart, we sent over, 100? 200
hundreds of
insulin.
Yeah.
It was strange because it was a tiny box, but that tiny box was worth almost £2,000.
Yes, when we did the transfer of medicine 1 week, there were 3 boxes, and they were worth over £3,000. And we got to Albail, and the guy said to us, look, there are 5-6 boxes there, and they're worth over €9,000 because medicine is expensive. But there were medicine which...
And the guy in the hospital in Ukraine, apparently, when he saw that we'd managed to send out insulin, he just burst into tears, didn't he?
Doctors.
It was amazing that we'd
You can
managed.
put the next slide. This is just some pictures of the stuff we are bringing, and people just donate it. You can go again. And that's our pharmacist. That's Lynn with the back there, if you don't know. So, since we started, we sent at least 1 transport. There were weeks when we managed to go 2 transports. This is they've done, the charity which we work with, they've done a report about a month ago. It was over 72 tons of food, of aid, worth over 100,000 euros, which was just sent from us, you guys, and other people like us. And 12 families moved to Alba Iulia. The protocol was like this: we would go into Ukraine, and then when we would come back, we bring families, children, and mothers.
Yeah.
One of the hard things was to get kids my son's age and my daughter's age who needs antidepressives, because they would have nightmares and they would just be constantly crying. But over 30 so families we brought back. 12 decided to stay in Romania. They got jobs, they got flats now rented, and God has just been good. The beauty of, as I said this morning, you do the maths at the end. You know, as a charity, we know how much money comes in and we know where we stand. But somehow you do the maths and they don't add up. We're still sending, even now, every week from us, £1,000 worth of stuff towards Ukraine with the charity. And you do the maths, we should have been over and done months ago. But by the grace of God, we're still going, and for us that's such an encouragement. Now, of course, you can put out the next slide. Of course, we can't talk about everything in 20 or so minutes, but as I said, part of our ministry, I'm part fire volunteer. That's me and my son, who wants to be a fireman, and he's old enough to join, not to fight the fires, but he can watch and take pictures. But just one more round. We home at the moment is about 40 or so degrees plus. Now, it's no easy job to be fully geared and to go to a big fire like it was there a minute ago. But these are some of the fire volunteers we work with. You can see the chimney, the red 4x4 in the back. And one more slide. And another thing you want to say about this? Quickly?
Yeah, this is just some of the outreach that we've done. It's many of the kids and adults travel by bike. There's not really any bike safety, and for anybody who's been to Romania knows that the roads aren't particularly safe.
Preston can tell you that, yeah?
So we decided to do a bike safety course, and we bought vests, and we thought, and with a local policeman, and we thought, we'll get maybe 10. But we ended up
You can put the next slide. We ended up with 50 plus of children. This was last year.
Yeah.
Of course, it took me for a
and
ride.
then after we had to do a massive bike ride, which absolutely killed him.
Yeah.
But it was just a great outreach for kids. And the amazing thing is they keep asking us when we're going to do another one, which is always a good sign.
I think we have one more. Yes. So the wood chopper, the wood chipper. Now you have to understand, back at home, where we live, we don't have any gas, or the only source of heating is wood. The problem with where we are, in the summer is nice and hot, 40 degrees plus, but in the winter it gets to minus 20. I think we have the lowest where we are, where it could go for 3 months, really, really cold. And wood got very expensive, and if you imagine elderly lady or man or couple earning £200 a month, and one load, every house needs at least one load. And one load, which is 3 cubic meters of wood, it's about 250 or 300 pounds. And they need that for the winter in order to survive. And as a charity, we got a tractor. We were bringing every year wood from the forest. The problem was they changed the law. And now we are not allowed to take more than 20 cubic meters as a charity per year. And that it was like we couldn't do anything. And by the grace of God, we are led. We got what's called the wood chopper, and what it does, it uses all the branches left. The beauty of that is that the branches are free at the moment. We talked to 2 forestmen. We have a lot of forest around, and they agreed to let us use it for free. So what you do, you put the branches too. It brings in a sack of potatoes, and then hopefully we take those and we bring it to different people which need it and use it ourselves, of course. But there are 3 slides there, I think. You'll help us to provide wood for the family. One good thing is using everything, so you kind of use every resources, and it's almost free. We only need the petrol for the tractor to run the machine. And one more slide. So this is us. We be aware we can't do everything in 20 minutes, but at least it gives you an idea. We have a prayer list, but before we do the prayer list, are there any questions? We don't bite that bad, just a little bit. But if there are any questions, feel free. Or if you want to know anything in particular, we might answer. She definitely will answer, but...
Sarah, can you explain something about the culture in Romania in terms of, what day off do you get during the week? And what time does work finish during the day?
For me, or just
For you as a family, what happens?
Oh, well, as a family, for most people who work in ministry will know, I'm sure Mark and Izzy know, that you don't really get time off. I think work doesn't really stop because we're always on call, and many times we get calls in the middle of the night. It's one of the things which we haven't managed to talk about, because there's so much we could talk about, is the fact that a lot of people don't have cars and means to get to hospital and things like that. So we do a lot of hospital runs and a lot of doctor's appointments. So we could be called at any time, and it has happened a lot. Many people say lock the door. We do lock the door, but people will knock until you open the door. So there's absolutely no point in locking it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's difficult to know where to say no. I was given an example a few years ago. I was called at 1:30 in the morning, and this guy, his wife was ill, and said, could you just drop her to the hospital? She thought she had food, that's what I was told, that she had food poison. So I said, that's fine. But it got us in a bad moment, and I said to him, look, I don't have any money. I have petrol enough to get to the hospital and back, but no more than that, which is 20 kilometers journey. I said, but I'm happy to do it. By the time we got to the hospital, it was 2:30, and she was pregnant, which I didn't know. She was losing the baby. And the doctors looked at her and says, there's nothing we can do. You have to go to the main hospital, which is 100 kilometers away.
About an hour and a half away.
And an hour and a half, yes, in the car. And I said we looked at each other and said, what are we going to do? It's like, by then it was 3 o'clock in the morning.
They wouldn't give her an ambulance.
They wouldn't give her an ambulance, so I said, you have to find your way. So we were talking, debating on the hall. There was a lady from our church. She's part of a doctor friend. She lives a very simple life, and her son was drunk, and she ended up with him in the hospital as a young man. And she was upset with God, and she said, God, why am I again in the hospital? And she overheard us on the hall, and she called me, and she says, I was arguing with God, why am I here? And she said, but now I know. She said, I have 10 pounds on me, put some petrol in, get them to the hospital and back. And we did. And the doctor, when we got to the main hospital, she said, if you would have been an hour and a half late, she would have died, because she was bleeding really bad. And it's very difficult when you think someone's life depends on it to actually say no. If that makes sense.
How many of you actually support what you're doing? What support do you get as you're giving these links?
So we have a team now at the church. When we started the pandemic, it was funny because it was me and Sarah, and we had to learn how to do sound, camera, and all of that. Now we have a team of younger people. Support, we are supported by the charity here, Community Action Romania. You might have heard about it. And they do support us financially, and they help us. And we get people like some of you guys sometimes come over a short-term period. Preston did a good job with the woods last time. But it gave you a taste, and where is Derek? He did as well. It gives you a taste of actually what you have to go through to prepare for winter and so on. But there's always, you'll see in the prayer points in a minute, there's always a need for resources and human resources, because it does get very tiring sometimes.
Isn't it? Are you the only people that's like on call, when you get a call and you go off to meet the need. Are you the only two that does that?
Yes.
Yes, because we made ourselves available. There are other people in Romania which could do it, but they choose not to. They choose at 6 o'clock when they get home. That's it. But we made ourselves available, so yeah. Yes, there is. Roger would provide.
There is a Facebook page, and that.
Roger would explain, and where we try. For example, when we did the Ukraine transport, we would put in the car. She's very good. She'll hold the camera and do a little video, just keeping people up to date of where we are and what's going on. Any other questions? Yeah. You're going to say something?
I was going to ask a question. In your village, what's the dynamics of people moving out of the village? Are there enough jobs for, so you've got youth? Is there a point where sometimes people go to some of the bigger cities? Or, how does that affect the church? Or do most people stay?
No, up until now, most young people left.
They would go to universities.
They would go to uni in the big towns, and then they very rarely would come back. But since the pandemic, we've actually seen a big rise in people coming home because, you imagine we were in complete lockdown, and for us, being in a village, our garden backs out onto fields, so we weren't technically allowed out, but we weren't in contact with anybody. We went for a walk on the field, nobody knew, and in the village we were blessed by that. But then you think of the thousands of people in the big towns that are in high-rise apartments, no air conditioning and everything. It was just awful for them. So now what we've seen is people are slowly coming back to the countryside. Yeah,
a lot of people choose to at least buy a property, even if they don't move. Yeah. But for example, in our village, just in the last year, probably 3 or so families moved to the village just for that reason. Yeah. But work can be quite difficult. If the younger generation which work IT, they can work from home, and we have a few young people working from home, which is quite good.
There's a couple of factories as well,
yeah.
But
not the best place to work.
Yeah, it's interesting because you said about wages in Romania. Some of the wages that are in these, I shouldn't call them sweatshops, but they are.
In the factories they will be paid minimum. So, for example, in the village we have a factory like that. I think they get £300-400 a month, and they do work. They stand up and work.
Yeah, bad conditions, working conditions.
But where you don't have any other choices, you do. Yes, sorry.
What's the government doing about the Ukrainian?
The Romanian government?
I guess it's something to pray for. They've been talking a long time about bringing national service back in Romania. It was something that only stopped about 10 years, when you're 16 and you have to go serve in the army for, I think it was, how long was it?
A year.
So since the war in Ukraine started, there's been lots of talks about them bringing that back. We've been praying that it doesn't happen.
Yes, and with Ukraine, one of the scariest stuff is when the government decided to give people over 60s a tablet.
Maybe you know what it is. I don't know. It's against radiation.
We call it iod, and it's to do with... say again?
Iodine.
Yes, thank you very much.
Yeah.
And in case of nuclear, you'd take it and apparently it would give you a chance. It will help. And that was kind of scary for us because being so close. Yeah.
Difficult times.
We'll just give you a few prayer points before we finish. Pray for the war to stop. We get used with very easy. And we're noticing pandemic, people got so used to that they stopped praying against COVID. And we just learned to live. And what we don't want is people to get used with the war and just live with. I think we have, as churches, we should pray that actually will stop. And I believe we have power to pray that will stop. Pray for resources for Ukraine to continue. Talking with different charities, there always that big boom in the beginning where people giving, and then it's just a small drops. Family to be able to return safely back. The one good news, about 2 weeks ago, I had a chat with guys going to Ukraine, and they said that actually families are returning back slowly, which is in some places, which is a very good news, and it helps. And pray for the rebuild of the country. We already talking strategies and see how, when the war stops, how we can help rebuild. Now it will take years, probably dozens of years, to actually rebuild, but we can prepare now, so when it happens, we can be more efficient. So anyone, lady or man, who has a good of muscles and good heart, one point, once the war finishes, you can join us and go and help. Pray for the church. For the team, we have a team growing, which has been very blessed. We are very blessed in the last 2 years. We still have to come very early to church, but I don't have to worry about setting up the camera or the sound, and we have teams which grow. We have challenges. We were supposed to have, I think, from your church, your sound desk, but that got stolen somewhere in Austria in the transport. We never got it. But we are in desperate need. Our sound system is used to the maximum. Sometimes we were stretching over, and it makes it very challenging. You who serves here, musicians, would understand that can be very difficult and challenging sometimes. Pray for the growth of the church. As I said, through the pandemic, we saw a lot of people coming to Christ, a lot of younger people coming to church. Just pray that to continue and God to keep changing their lives. And yes, for the new generation. Pray for us as a family. We have 4 more days to rest, and it's needed. Tomorrow, we're hopefully going to go to Camber Sands. Yes, Ella. We promise we're going to go to the seaside. But we do need rest. Pray for resources. Like the lady said, we need human resources, we need finances, we need resources in every way. And wisdom. I guess sometimes you can be so overwhelmed by everything else that sometimes we get discouraged, I guess, isn't it? And then we usually get a text from Preston. And there are people which sometimes just a little text or a little something, it just picks you back up. But pray for wisdom that we can stay focused, true to what God called us to do, and to continue, I guess, to do what we're supposed to do. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I was remembering, as Danny said at the beginning, about how church used to be. And Lynn and I were out there in 99, and Lynn went to church with trousers, with earrings, head uncovered, and if you could do anything wrong, she did it wrong. Sat on the wrong side of the church as well. But we've grown through that period with them. But I want to say thank you first of all to the church on behalf of CAR. I'm the chairman. We now have 2 new members on CAR. Terry's one, and Tim Perks is the other. So we're really grateful for the support emotionally, spiritually, financially. Interestingly enough, Danny was saying you never know what's going to happen. When we put the Ukrainian appeal out, we raised £28,000 in 48 hours. That was our entire annual turnover. It was raised in 48 hours. Now it's dropped off. And we'll leave it there. But some of you said, okay, well, do you have Facebook? What do you have? There's 2 things you can look at. You know it's Community Action Romania. If you take the first 3 letters every word, ComActRom, there is a website, comactrom.com. And that's all the latest news gets posted up there. We put the links up there. I've actually taken a video, or they're capturing it tonight, and I'm going to put that up there as well. So you can do that. There's a Facebook page as well, which is Community Action Romania Facebook page. You can stay in touch that way. Lynn is the representative in the UK for the 38, well, for the sponsors. I don't know how many sponsors we've got now, or donors we've got. 38 for the the families. So if anybody wants to find out more about that. But there's a couple of things Danny didn't put up there, because they talk about their work. But you might remember something that was quite significant he said this morning. How many shirts did he have? 1. Their house is still not insulated. -15 in the winter. It's getting better. You know, and these are the things that they are going through day by day. And as I suppose as a dad and as a chairman of the charity, I say, well, great. I mean, one of the big changes we made, was it last year, Danny, when we put you on salary? Yeah. Up till last year, and that's probably 8 and 10 years, I don't know, Danny and Sarah have been working, but they've had no income, no health insurance, no pension. What we've been doing is sending them out money, and it goes through their accountant, through an accountant in a charity in Romania, and then they get donations. But everything you had to have a receipt for. So if you went for your groceries, you had to get a receipt. If you went for, well, last year we actually got to the point where we said we have to be responsible and put them on a salary. It cost us £400 to do it because the tax and the insurance. But it was the right thing to do. And I'm really grateful because I know a number of people here have stepped up and said, we want to support Danny and Sarah as well. So I'm grateful for the church for its support. I mean, you did a great job. Ben, where are you, Ben? Yeah, Ben, you did a great job raising money, I know, for the Ukraine appeal. But I want you to remember the spiritual needs, but also think about them as a couple as well, what they're going through, what they have to sacrifice. What we never realised as a charity for about 4 or 5 years, we sent them money for their donation, but they spent it on fuel to take people to hospital. Where did that, you know, where do they get the funding from? Danny, do you get a salary from your church? No. The church can't even afford him. So all that they're supported is from the UK. And we're really grateful for this church. I'm not going to move church, Mark, but it's all right. Our previous church also supports them. So it seems wherever we go, they kind of, we might need a few more churches. But no, we're blessed. Lynn and I are blessed by the work we're going. We are hoping to finish our house out there, which is dead opposite Danny and Sarah, this year, maybe. And we're going to be able to host people to come out as well. So, you know, you'll be able to come out. We'll be out there, hopefully, for longer periods as well. But it'd be nice to pray for them, Mark, wouldn't you? So is it an open time of prayer? How do you want to do that? Or Angela?
And maybe just in your tables, I think if we could pray, take something particular and pray together. Maybe Danny and Sarah, you want to perhaps move tables, perhaps, rather than... Because your family pray for you anyway, we know. So, yeah, I think if we could have a few minutes of prayer, and then I'll bring it to a close. Okay. So, Father, we just thank you for this time that we've been able to hear about your work in Romania, and we thank you for Danny and Sarah. We thank you for blessing them. We thank you for your plans coming to fruition through them, that they're open to your guidance. And Lord, we just pray for them over these last few days of their stay here, that you will give them good rest, that they'll feel refreshed when they return home, and that you'll be with them, you'll be walking with them, preparing the way of the next few things that they're going to be doing over the next month, Lord. We just pray protection over each one of them. In your name, Jesus. Amen.